When it comes to strengthening judicial independence in South Carolina, this morning's guest is working hard to set the bar real high. You met her yesterday. Part 2 of Flo Vinson is coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Garden City Furniture at 2444 Highway 17 Business in Garden City. We're on part 2 of strengthening judicial independence in South Carolina. And we're visiting with Flo Vinson, the president of the South Carolina Bar and a trial attorney in Florence. Good morning again, Flo.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming back in.
Thank you for having me again.
Particularly excited that today's the day you're flying up to New York to attend the American Bar Association meeting, which we talked a little about yesterday.
That's right.
And the excitement to be up there representing the entire state of South Carolina as the president of the 13,000-member South Carolina Bar, which is tremendous.
I'm very excited about that.
Learned a lot about strengthening judicial independence yesterday. Obviously, for viewers who didn't catch it yesterday, we want to go over a couple things. Of course, folks can go online to carolinapeople.com and watch your part 1 because you really did highlight some of the very important aspects about what the bar is doing in the area to really help strengthen judicial independence. But for viewers who may not have caught it yesterday, real quick about yourself. Are you originally from the area?
I am. I was born and raised in Florence, South Carolina. Went to College of Charleston for my undergraduate degree. Having a degree in political science, I then had to go to law school and had the pleasure of going to law school at the University of South Carolina in Columbia.
Right.
I clerked 2 years for the South Carolina Supreme Court for Judge David Harwell, and then returned home and entered the practice of law in Florence.
We talked a little bit about yesterday. I think you said 3 of your 4 brothers are also attorneys.
That's correct.
Very exciting. Did y'all ever think about practicing together, the 4 of y'all getting together, the Vinson Lester law firm?
But 2 of my 2 oldest brothers, Ken and John, did practice together for a few years. Just like I said, my one brother was in the Air Force for quite a while. One brother was in the FBI for a while. So we were just scattered by geographical differences. And then Dickie settled back along the Grand Strand. I'm in Florence, especially with my husband having the judgeship in the 12th Circuit. That we're pretty much staying there. And then have the brother in Columbia. Right.
So it still could happen way down the road, but not in the foreseeable future.
That's correct.
Very exciting hearing you talk yesterday about the South Carolina Bar and clearly how folks coming out of law school essentially after they pass the bar really become members of the bar. How does one become the president of the South Carolina Bar? Just what does that take? That must be a big deal.
I'm very honored and humbled by it. Basically, it's generally persons who have been very involved in the bar, different activities over a fairly long number of years. And we then have a nominating committee that's comprised a large portion of past presidents of the bar and then other representatives, and they propose a slate of officers. You actually run to be the secretary of the bar, then you run to be the treasurer, and then you run to be the president-elect, and then if you're president-elect, then the following year you automatically become the president.
How exciting. Yes, very exciting. Well, of course, and for you having to travel all over the state now and essentially get out to highlight big topics and to travel around the country. I mean, the opportunity to fly to New York today, but in any numbers of venues, you're really out there to make sure folks know not only about strengthening judicial independence, but lots of other topics that the bar is having to get the word out to the viewing public or to the public at large.
Yeah, I think, obviously lawyers tend to get the short end of the stick sometimes or the butt of the jokes, but in my opinion, there's always going to be a few bad apples in any barrel, but by and large, the attorneys in general and attorneys in this state are really outstanding people that are the coaches of the Little League ball teams, and they're on the boards and of their community, of their churches and civic organizations. We are really lucky to have the quality bar that we have here in this state.
Very definitely. Let's talk a little bit. Clearly, we went into it yesterday. Just before we break into some of the key questions, strengthening judicial independence. What exactly is judicial independence? What's the importance of it?
Greg, it's just the idea of the very basic fabric of our constitutional framework of having 3 independent branches of government, and the judicial needs to have as much independence as would the executive or the legislative in order for our checks and balance system to continue to work properly. Unfortunately, in recent times, the judiciary has come under attack when persons or groups of persons or special interest groups may not like a ruling on one particular case.
Right.
And they tend to direct their negative thoughts about that ruling either on the judiciary as a whole or even sometimes on the individual judge that issued the ruling. And once you start allowing outside influences other than the law and the facts of the case before a judge to have a bearing on the ruling, you're losing your right to a fair and impartial trial.
Just taking out, I've got to ask that question clearly. If you weren't here representing the South Carolina Bar, I mean, there must be times where an attorney is not happy with the judge's ruling and would like to think, golly, that judge didn't side necessarily for the right, but instead for his or her own personal thing. I'm sure at times it must cross your mind, albeit at the same time, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't cross your mind. I assume most people it would cross their mind, but at the same time attacking the judge, him or herself, as opposed to just the circumstance of the case is probably the improper way to go.
Well, I mean, obviously we're a human institution made up of humans. No one's perfect. No one's going to make the right call every time. And of course, you always, or almost always in a law case, have 2 sides with very competing interests. So however the judge rules, generally one side's not going to be happy. Nonetheless, we're certainly served better to have courthouses to go into, to have decisions made, rather than fighting it out in the street or shooting it out at the OK Corral.
Absolutely.
I liken it to your parents when you're growing up and they told you yes or no, and maybe those decisions weren't always correct, but it was the final word and it settled the issue and it allowed things to run smoothly.
Yes, I need to have you talk to my daughter and remind her of that. Thank you, Flo. That's just the basics of it. Some ways that judicial independence has been threatened in South Carolina. Can you give viewers a couple of examples of maybe ways that it's really gotten the South Carolina Bar interested enough to get you out talking about it?
Right. On a national level, I think you have seen, again, tends to be special interest groups, and it's understandable that everyone has their own cause or view and wants to, support that and further it. But if a judge makes a ruling and it's not maybe what they would have chosen, and oftentimes they really are not intimately familiar with the facts and law of that one case that was before the judge. Nonetheless, they talk about, oh, that's an activist judge and he's making up the law, these types of comments, when really nothing could be further from the truth. He or she is applying the law as it's set by the legislature and interpreted by the United States Supreme Court to the set of facts in front of them. If that judge were to make a mistake, there's always an appellate review. There's a process in place. You appeal it to in South Carolina, you appeal it to the Court of Appeals, and you can also ask the Supreme Court to review it. So that's the correct mechanism for dealing with a mistake, not lambasting the judicial system or the individual
judges. Sure. Attacks on rulings, judicial accountability, clearly that you talked about earlier, and then obviously those special interest groups. And when we think about influence of special interest groups, are they able to get to judges? Are they able to influence them? Are they able to have an impact on them? Clearly, you talked about yesterday in South Carolina, it's much more difficult since judges are elected by the legislature.
That's correct. I was going to say, I think in other states where there's popular election, special interest groups can exert even more influence. That has, like I say, we did have an election cycle a couple of cycles back where a special interest group was literally running TV ads, which I guess it would, maybe you were trying to get the constituents to contact their legislator, but ultimately you're almost running a TV campaign to try to influence the legislators to vote for a judge because it does or doesn't promote a particular agenda of one group. And that was, like I say, the bar was very upset by that, and fortunately that has not occurred since then.
One of the committees that I saw, one of the many committees that you serve on or had previously served on prior to your role as president and may serve on concurrently, is the media advertising or advertising for attorneys Share with viewers a little about some of the things that you all go through as the 13,000 attorneys statewide, and thinking about not necessarily holding others accountable, but just what are there examples of what are some of the things the committee does?
Thank you, Greg. It's a great question. I think lawyer advertising has been a hot topic, and interestingly, probably a hotter topic in the legal community than without. The Chief Justice set up a commission or task force to study that issue. The court is our disciplinary and governing body that can set our rules and parameters. Obviously, they have to do so within the Constitution. We obviously don't want to violate anyone's First Amendment right to free speech. The legal community just feels strongly that ads that are less than becoming or professional tend to debase not just the particular firm or lawyer that's being advertised, but to sort of give the public a bad feeling about the profession as a whole. And I don't know the numbers, but I would venture to say I know it would be less than 5%, maybe less than 1% of attorneys that have TV advertising, and yet the entire profession gets sort of painted with that brush.
Sure.
So it's a balance of letting the people have their First Amendment rights within your profession, but trying to limit it and keep it within the bounds of dignity and truthfulness that we would expect of one another.
So there's some types of TV advertising, for instance, that would be better than others, or would it be virtually any TV advertising is not? Or is it the same thing with Yellow Pages, ads? Is that an issue? Or I'm just trying to think about what some examples are of. I'm sure there must be some. It's kind of the pornography thing in the Supreme Court. Yeah.
You know it when you see it. Really, it has been the television advertising that has generated the greatest amount of controversy. I guess because that is something that's put out there, and people are going to see it whether they choose to or not.
Emotion, yeah.
At least with the Yellow Pages, someone has chosen to look it up and go there. And it's just the feeling among the great majority of the bar that any advertising, television or otherwise, should be done in a dignified manner. And to protect the consumer, we want to be sure that what's being stated is factually accurate and not misleading.
There's a big issue that I know you all, as you said, oftentimes some issues are more important to attorneys, but a lot of people have been talking about holdover magistrates. Share with viewers a little bit about that issue, and it's recently clearly been in the media, but how has it impacted judicial independence, if at all?
Yeah, another great question. The issue of holdover magistrates, of course, the magistrate courts deal with controversies generally up to about $7,500 is their monetary limit, or first offense of some criminal matters that have a year or less potential for imprisonment. And although it's sort of small claims court maybe would be a way to describe it, probably more citizens end up contacting the judiciary or the court system in the magistrate's court percentage-wise than the rest of the court. The current process of appointing the magistrates, the legislators from that area put forth a name, and the other members of the legislature approve or reject that.
Right.
And what has occurred, even though they have a set term, when that term ends, rather than them ceasing to serve or being reelected or having someone else elected, they're just sort of in a holding pattern. And so they are somewhat serving at the pleasure of that the legislator or legislators from their area.
Right.
And there's some allegations that maybe some legislators have expected some certain outcomes in cases, and as we always say, we certainly want to prevent even the appearance of impropriety.
Right.
And I think having a judicial officer who can be removed from his office by a legislator puts some pressure on his or her decisions in cases. So the bar is very much in favor of ending that practice. We have our House of Delegates meeting 2 years back, voted on that, and agreed that that's a practice that we think should come to an end.
Right. And
either when someone's term ends, you either reappoint them or you appoint someone else.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Quickly. That's critical. We think about in another big topic is how do lay people just communicate with attorneys without necessarily having to hire. I mean, just some basic things. If a viewers have questions about a pending case, for instance, before a magistrate or another judge, what are some resources that either the bar offers? Obviously here, your role as the president of South Carolina Bar, a lot going on, and there are a number of things we want to get into, but what are some of the resources? I think I saw an 800 number, the 800-868-2284. Is that probably the best number for someone to call for a referral service?
That is. The bar does operate a lawyer referral service. That call goes to our bar staff, and you tell them what area of the law your question is in and geographically where you're located. We have bar members that voluntarily join this service, and they will have an initial consultation with a client for no more than $50.
I saw that, yeah.
Right, and so if someone's having difficulty finding a lawyer or just doesn't know what lawyer to choose for a particular need, that's a great resource for them. We also have the Ask a Lawyer, sort of a phone-in where someone takes the incoming call, determines what area of the law your question pertains to, and sends you to a lawyer that's volunteering to be there that afternoon or that evening, and they will answer those questions for you. We also, across the state, have law school for non-lawyers.
Oh, yeah, I want to hear about that.
You don't get a diploma at the end of it, unfortunately. But we do. We've had a good turnout from the public for that. We'll have attorneys that work primarily in several different areas. Usually bankruptcy and family law are two of the more popular topics that we discuss. Generally, the lawyer will speak for 30 or 40 minutes trying to give the basic information and then take questions from the audience and answer those for them. Another resource that the bar has is the Client Assistance Program.
Oh, good, yeah.
Which if you have a lawyer handling a matter for you and you have a bit of a problem, it doesn't rise to the level of an ethical violation, but you sort of need somebody to step in and mediate. They can actually reach the bar, and we have staff people that will help them work through those problems.
I saw the bar also give some advice for pro se divorce if folks are in that position. And
They have put together some information to help people. It's always a tough issue because you see some people that represent themselves that because they feel like they cannot afford an attorney, but then they end up getting a result that they really couldn't have afforded not to have an attorney represent them.
Sure.
But there certainly are cases where there's not issues of custody, where there's very minimal or no assets, there's no retirement funds at issue. And with those people coming to the courtroom and they don't know what to say or do, then it's just wasting court time and their efforts.
Oh, I bet, sure.
So we have tried to put together the package to help them in that circumstance.
Right. I saw there's also a fee disputes board. Not that that ever comes up, but if there is, if it did, there is a group there to help mediate that or help work that through.
That's correct. If a lawyer, we're required to have a written fee agreement, and so generally, hopefully, the lawyer and the client knows from the very beginning what the fee arrangement will be.
Sure.
But occasionally, because things develop during the case or circumstances change, they get to the end of the case, and either the client feels like the fee was too much, or the lawyer feels like the fee was too little, and so this is a body that will mediate that and allow them to resolve it in a way that everybody can accept.
I was excited to see that next month, September 17th, we've got the Ask a Lawyer that I believe you said will be both here in Myrtle on the Strand as well in the PD that same day.
That's correct. We'll do that at two locations on that day, where you phone in and have your questions answered. Those are done across the state, not necessarily all on the same day, but at various times, and are usually advertised in the local papers such as the Herald.
Great, sure, of course. All area papers, and I'm sure papers in the PD. It's good to get the word out, and particularly for a free service like that on a particular day. That's wonderful. You know, we think about a lot of topics. Strengthening judicial independence has been a big one, clearly, for the South Carolina Bar recently. What are some other? We got about 5 minutes, Flo. Are there any other big topics that you all are dealing with, or that you expect to encounter today, tonight, when you get to New York for the American Bar Association meeting? Anything on a national level that you've been hearing a lot about that South Carolina, that our viewers would want to know about?
But one thing that is sort of one of my initiatives as bar president is we have a a committee that's called Lawyers Helping Lawyers, that for members in our profession that have substance abuse issues or emotional problems, psychological problems, the studies are a little bit unclear, but basically it appears that those type problems occur at least twice the rate within the legal profession as within just the general population. So we have that service, which of course is more within our practice. We have also sadly had some suicides over the past few years. So we're going to try to do a better job of making sure that all of our lawyers are healthy and well equipped to take care of the people that they're serving. An area that is one that raises a lot of questions sort of comes about with the crossover, how it's sort of blending into an accounting firm and a law firm, and who can do what duties and roles, and certainly with technology and the global economy and business world, that's becoming a little bit tricky of waters to navigate.
Does the South Carolina Bar ever take a stand on issues like the clogging up the courts, or the courts being slowed down, or whether the strengths of mediation or arbitration, the pros of those, or is that more topics for someone else to get into?
We do like to take positions on matters that we can, because we represent mandatorily the entire bar. So a lot of issues, as you might guess, that one side of the bar has one view, the other side another. So we certainly don't want to take sides within our own body. But general things like appointing judges in a timely fashion, protecting the independence of the judiciary, recognizing the importance of the rule of law, things that all lawyers can agree on. We will take a position on those and literally adopt a resolution and send it sometimes to the media, sometimes to the legislature.
Right. That's great, Flo. We think about you growing up in Florence, right there in the heart of the PD, attending school in Charleston, finishing law school there in Columbia, and then doing your clerkship there in Columbia, but being back and forth a little bit to the PD. What was it about Florence in particular that really pulled you back? What was it that made you want to be back where you grew up?
I think certainly my family, my mother still lives in Florence, as my husband's parents are there as well. And I like the sort of small town. I think people in general, and lawyers are no exception, tend to be more friendly, more civil to one another when you know that you're going to see them at your child's Little League ball game that night, or your mother and their mother are going to be sitting on the same pew together the next Sunday. I had a friend who had a judicial clerkship in Florence for a while and then relocated to Columbia, and she came back on business one day and we went to lunch together at a local lunch spot, and half the people that walked in would say, "Hey, Flo," and I'd say, and she said, "I've just forgotten what a cozy small town atmosphere this is."
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about just that, those atmospheres that are that special, and even sometimes in a big city you can find something, but nothing like in a community with a tight bar or a tight group of knit community like Florence, which is one you shared with us a little bit off camera early this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning, about when we were thinking about childhood heroes and someone that really motivated you, is special hearing that. If you don't mind sharing with viewers, who was really your childhood hero?
Right. Yeah, we discussed that. My father would be definitely my childhood hero. He had a great love of education. He stressed taking advantage of that opportunity, and because he graduated from high school during the Depression, he was denied that chance to do it, and had wanted it so badly and valued it so highly that he just implicitly instilled that in myself and my four brothers.
Right. That's great. Great sharing. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, sir. We've run out of time. Absolutely. Stay tuned to a little more Carolina People with the president of the South Carolina Bar, Flo Vinson, coming up next. 13,000 practicing attorneys statewide. One of them has to go out and represent them. One of them has to represent them on community affairs shows, traveling the state, speaking on issues like strengthening judicial independence in South Carolina. One of them has to represent them flying to New York City this afternoon to be up there for the American Bar Association meeting that person's Flo Vinson. She's out there every day representing the South Carolina Bar and all of its members and all citizens throughout the state who have a real interest in the bar and the judiciary. And if you're interested in trying to find a good attorney in your area, the South Carolina Bar steps out and has a great referral service, 800-868-2284. They've also got a great-looking website, scbar.org, scbar.org. Check them out online and learn a little more about Flo Vinson. Flo, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
The pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Ray.
Absolutely, yes.